38 bombers launched an attack on Pearl Harbor, and the US military was at all unprepared and was still immersed in a beautiful sleep. People were attracted by the fighter jets, but they thought they were exercising. Then the first torpedo of the Japanese army successfully shot into the sea, and the wind rushed towards the US ship at an extremely fast speed. The strong explosion instantly broke the previous calm. Only then did people feel panic and flee everywhere. The soldiers quickly called for getting up to fight. However, the explosion still did not affect the disinfection work. Until a missile penetrated slowly, it was already too late. Then the Japanese army began to export the version of Juharang in a crazy way, and instantly turned into a sea of fire. Bullets attacked overwhelmingly. The US military had nowhere to hide, and there was even no chance to organize a counterattack. The Japanese army firmly controlled air supremacy and was completely suppressing the battle, and everything they flew over was destroyed. In a short while, the entire Pearl Harbor was filled with smoke and was unbearable to see. The US military had no choice but to jump into the sea to seek confidentiality, but torpedoes shuttled through the crowd, and Japanese fighter jets shot wildly at the sea, so they still couldn't escape the disaster. For a time, more than 2,000 people died, and even the hospitals, schools and airports were moved to flat ground. Even so, the Japanese army still refused to give up. They turned their target into the US military's backup airport. The soldiers' sturdy crane guns began to fire wildly. With his roar, a fighter plane was successfully shot down, and this was the beginning of the counterattack. The US military fighter jets tried to take off, but as soon as they left the ground, they instantly turned into a ball of fire. In the end, only 2 of dozens of fighter jets took off successfully. However, the enemy was too numerous to face each other, and it was obviously not a solution to fight head-on. So the soldiers on the ground set up machine guns and tried to cover the 2 of them. They finally survived the gap. This sneak attack took advantage of the Japanese army, losing 29 fighter jets, but destroyed 19 main warships and 188 fighter jets of the US military. Even so, his subordinates still wanted to continue the attack, but at this time Yamamoto 56 stopped the plan. As expected, the successful attack caused anger to the US military, and they were about to pay the price of nearly destruction of the country. At this time, corpses were everywhere in Pearl Harbor, and the smoke of gunpowder could not be dissipated for 9 years. Looking at the tragic situation on the sea, the general couldn't help but burst into tears. The soldiers tried hard to clean up the wreckage and wanted to rescue more comrades, but the crowd was trapped under the deck. Although they survived, they could only roar helplessly and eventually drowned alive. They couldn't believe everything in front of them. In just 2 hours, more than 3,000 US troops died tragically at Pearl Harbor. Subsequently, the United States held an emergency meeting, and it was necessary to revenge, but they had suffered heavy losses just now and were too far away from Japan. If they wanted to have a complete blow, they had to dispatch aircraft carriers. When it comes to aircraft carriers, some people began to object. If they were hit by the other side's counterattack, the losses would be even more immeasurable. After hearing this, the president's attitude became stronger and stronger. He stood up with all his strength, just to express that nothing could be done. Soon, the revenge plan officially began, and the soldiers removed the aircraft's equipment to reduce weight, and the purpose of this was to carry more bombs and reach Japanese territory faster. However, the fuel of the fighter jets is limited, and after the plan is completed, they can only land in the nearest China. To this end, every pilot must learn a Chinese sentence, "I am an American." Subsequently, the Bumblebee aircraft carrier was equipped with 16 modified fighter jets and headed straight towards Japan. It was discovered by the Japanese army when it was 300 kilometers away from the takeoff coordinate. The aircraft carrier quickly entered combat state, and the pilot had to take off early. The fighter planes crossed the coastline and quickly arrived over Tokyo. The soldiers smiled and directly locked their targets at the Japanese arsenal. With a command, bombs fell down one after another.